Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to present this. This is joint work with my colleague Bertil, who's in the audience, and Erik Sørensen, and our PhD student, Sebastian Fest. So the backdrop for this is essentially work we've done before. So we looked at how when people find inequality is fair. So some of the literature typically assume that people dislike all types of inequality. We find that people sometimes find inequality is fair. And in particular, they often find inequality is fair if the inequality reflects certain choices people have made. So if you choose to work harder, that's fine, right? If you choose to, that you earn more than somebody who chooses to work less hard. So that's one. What we would try to do here is to find out what is it about choice that makes it make them so important. It's the fact that it gives you control over your situation. And this is interesting because we're given all these new choices all the time. Some of those choices give you more control over your life, but some seems to be quite nominal. In Norway, we recently introduced a system where you could choose your doctor. You get a list of 2,000 doctors, and you've never seen any name, you don't know anything about them. You just pick one, right? So it's a purely nominal choice. Same thing when you have to choose between where to place your pension fund. All the funds are more or less identical. You choose one. It's a choice, but it doesn't seem to give you very much more control. So what we want to look at here is essentially, does choices matter even if they don't give you more control over your situation? That's the kind of key issue. So, and specifically, what we look at here, we look at setting, and I'll describe it in detail, of course, where we give people choice, but it's not, it's a choice without any real alternatives. It's no real alternatives because either you're choosing between identical alternatives, so to speak, or it's more or less a forced choice in the sense that one of the alternatives are really, really bad, and the other is good. And we want to look at, does that choice affect people's willingness to eliminate income inequality? That wise. Okay, so the experimental design, we have 3 phases. First, we have a work phase. So we have that in almost all our experiments where we like when people do distribute income, it's nice that they have a feeling that they have an entitlement to it. So we have work phase. We have an earnings phase where we determine how much people earn from doing that job. And then we have a distribution phase. I'll explain this in detail, just giving the overview. And then we have 3 treatments that only differ at the earning stage. A base treatment where there's no choice, a treatment where we introduce a nominal choice, and a treatment where we introduce a forced choice. And then in the distribution phase, we have a spectator, a third party who's not involved, determining the distribution between 2 other places. Just briefly, we had 422 students from the University of Bergen and the Norwegian School of Economics. It's a between design. We do fairly large sessions, so people are randomly allocated to different treatments within session. So we don't need to think about session specs. It's double-blind, payments made in cash afterwards, and fairly high payments. So on average, they leave with approximately $85, including the show fee. OK, so how did this work? First, in the earnings phase, and that was the same thing in all treatments. We simply asked people to do a simple job, and that is to de-scramble English sentences. So they get a list of 5 words, and then they're going to make up a sentence of 4 words. So we ask them to work continuously. We don't measure their productivity or anything like that. And people typically work. I mean, they seem to be enjoying this a little bit even when they do it. Importantly, we don't inform them that they're going to be paid for this. So they don't kind of enter into this expecting anything. What happens now? Now I'm just going through the base treatment. I'll explain how it differs when we do the other treatment. So in the earnings phase, it's where it becomes fun, right? So then we tell them by surprise that we're going to pay you for this. But we're going to pay you in a special way. We're going to pay you, so I can actually read exactly what we say, because this is the sentence that we manipulate. So like that. Your payment will be determined by a lottery, in which you, with equal probability, earn either 800 Norwegian kroners, that's approximately 125 US dollars, or 0 NOK. In the lottery, a ball will be randomly drawn from an urn containing an equal number of yellow and green balls. If a yellow ball is drawn, you earn 800 NOK, and if a green ball is drawn, you earn 0 NOK. Okay, so obviously, people are not asked to make any choice here. we simply introduce a random element that determines. So half of the participants then get 800, half get nothing. Just not to deceive them, we told them there is going to be something happening afterwards, a distribution phase, but we didn't tell them anything about that. Okay. And then what happened in the distribution phase? Well, we have a third party, had been part of the same treatment, was given the opportunity to transfer money. So we matched a loser and a winner. So we had two persons. One had earned nothing, one 800. And we tell this third party, now you're given the opportunity to transfer money from the winner to the loser, as much as they wanted the 800. And that's it, essentially. Okay, so the main idea here, what was that? We wanted to create, and we've done a lot of these experiments. So we know that people typically find the initial distribution here very unfair, because people have done the same job. They hadn't accepted, so it would have been different if they were told they were going to be paid with a lottery and then they worked, then they accepted it. But they didn't make any choice of accepting that lottery. It was forced upon them. And so in that sense, this is just brute luck. So we expected people, to a large extent, to try to eliminate that. So what did we do? So the main feature of the design is that we manipulate, we change in the three treatments how the earnings are determined. And we introduce what we call a nominal choice and a forced choice. So and I'll just describe these in detail. What we want to see essentially is how does the introduction of a nominal choice or a forced choice affect the behavior of spectators in the distribution phase. Okay, so this is what we did with the nominal choice. Essentially, everything was the same. They worked. We tell them we're going to pay you. We have this, but we now change a little bit. So we say, we will now ask you to choose between two colors, yellow and green. Your choice will determine the outcome of a lottery in which you with equal probability earn either 800 or 0. In the lottery, and everything else is the same. You see the point? So so now they can actually choose the winning color. So the point that we call this a nominal choice because obviously choosing red or no, red is a really bad choice in this case, but the choice of color, yellow or green, I mean, there are identical alternatives. The distribution of outcomes is exactly the same. So from the ex-ante perspective, these are identical choices. And also people, we actually had one, I think it's probably a psychology student, who wrote in the comments it was obvious it was yellow that was the right answer for some reason. But so we were priming people for that. But most people, yeah, so it was very balanced in the color they chose. So this in this instance is nominal. Obviously, it could affect the actual outcome, right? So ex post alternatives are not the same. Because if you chose green and yellow comes up, if you then had chosen yellow, that would have been better, right? Yeah?
Do you have any sense of the probabilistic sophistication of your subjects? I mean, this is obvious to us, but...
So these are, at least half the students would know probabilities very well. And they are students of our school, and they're the best student in the country.
So can you look at heterogeneity between them and the other students?
Yeah, we don't find any. So this is fairly... I don't think this is hard to grasp, and we didn't have a feeling that people didn't understand it. But in the forced choice, so we wanted to essentially capture something else. I mean, sometimes you're given a choice like, 10 minutes? Oh, that's good. I thought it was 1 minute. Your money or your life, right? If I say that, it's a choice, but it doesn't feel real, right? Because the one alternative. Your life is really bad, right? So you probably prefer to give me your money. So we wanted to capture that. Obviously, we couldn't tell them your money or your life. So we said something a little bit similar. So we essentially give them an alternative between the lottery, which has an expected value of 400 kroners, and 25 kroners for sure. And what? No, this is just for the one individual.
Because the lottery, because then later on you're going to be transferring, right?
Yeah, so there was actually just 4 participants in the OSP experiment. They were not the students from the NHH. So these are just deeply confused people, we believe, but who chose that. So they're not part of the experiment. So in all the matches, there are always people who have chosen the lottery or part of the lottery. Okay. So the expected value is 16 times higher, right? Okay. So just to kind of summarize, essentially, this is the key point for us. So in the situation then, so that's a nice thing you pointed out, right? So the situations, the spectator phase are identical in very many respects, right? It's always one person having lost the lottery and having nothing, another winning the lottery and having 800. And in some ways, you could say, that's not just for Cappelen, that they couldn't really avoid this lottery. It was an unavoidable risk. We want to see, does this affect the behavior of the spectators? And you can look at this in many different ways. And just for to be brief, I've just chosen one way of cutting it. All different ways of cutting it gives the same picture. And that is to look at the average, essentially the average inequality in the after the distribution. So we measure for each pair what's the inequality that's left after the third party has done his job. And we take the average of that in each treatment. So essentially, what we're getting at here is your inequality acceptance, what you're getting at, right? How much inequality does the spectators choose? And just to remind you, so before the transfer, inequality measure, as we measure it here, is the income, the absolute difference in income divided on the total income. And then that measure before transfer is 1, right? You have one person has all the income. So what happens? So this is essentially the result. So in the base treatment, we get what we expected, right? So essentially, in this situation, 80% of the inequality is eliminated. So most people essentially transfer 400 to the loser. So essentially, they buy into this that this is brute luck. It's they both did the same job. They haven't made a choice. So what we then look at is, and this is of course what we're really getting at. What's the effect of introducing a forced choice or a nominal choice? But it's huge. The accepted inequality increases by 60% if you introduce a forced choice, and by 80% if you introduce a nominal choice. So that suggests that there are a lot of people who believe that the choice is important even if it doesn't really give you more control over the situation. I mean, these people are not crazy necessarily, right? I mean, I might find it hard myself to justify that view, but I mean, it's essentially people seem to attach importance, a lot of people seem to attach importance to choice, even in a setting where the choice doesn't really give you more control. Yeah?
Could it also be a way to justify to themselves why they do not give money away?
So this is a spectator design. So they don't give away their own money. They're dividing money between a winner and a loser. Otherwise, you wouldn't have so little inequality again. Then this is about so here you're giving 80%, right? And then you're eliminating a lot. So this is, so huge effect. So then just a couple of things. You can imagine that these people just do you understand this? So we have a measure of cognitive ability. That doesn't explain there's no interaction between the measure of cognitive ability. There is one thing that is very predictive of the treatment effect. And you can guess what that is. It's not gender.
Is it political affiliation?
It's political affiliation, 10 points. So essentially now, just to make it simpler, we put the two choice treatments together as a dummy. So this is and then of course, people in general, right-wing people accept more inequality. That wouldn't surprise you. But the interesting thing is that if you interact this with the treatment effect, essentially all the treatment effect is coming through people who voted on a right-wing political party in the last election. Which makes sense. I mean, the right-wing people typically attach more importance to choice, so this is perfectly consistent with what we would expect, but still it's an extremely strong effect. So essentially we don't have any significant effect of the choice treatment for people who voted on the left-wing parties. So, and here there is no effect on, yeah, there is actually, I said there was no gender effect. There's no interaction effect of gender, but it's a gender effect. So just to conclude, and I'm actually going to be on time. So the main thing here is that we show that choice has just a mere presence of a choice. Even if it is, in some sense, a choice that's not a real choice between real alternatives, seems to have an important effect on people's willingness to redistribute. It's consistent with, essentially, with the fairness view, saying that if there is a choice that potentially could affect your outcome, I mean, is it saying the choice affects your outcome, right? If you choose yellow, it affects your outcome, but it just doesn't give you more control. So people seem to attach importance to choice not only because it gives more control. That's the. And we see that more importantly among right-wing voters. And finally, and this is why we think this might be of some importance outside the lab as well. And this is, I mean, we have two really, at least in civilized countries like the Nordic countries, we care about both fairness and liberty. So we have this push where we want to eliminate certain types of inequality. The type of inequality we try to recreate here, right? So the inequality that's in our experiments is inequality due to brute luck. So most people, actually, if you ask them, would say this is, a lot of people would agree that this is a type of inequality that's unfair. At the same time, people like to give people freedom to choose. And potentially what we're showing is that there is a tension between giving people all this freedom to choose and people's willingness to redistribute.
And this is just
Thanks.
We have time for a question or two.
I don't know if this applies, but is on Friday, I gave a proposal to a donor, and what I did is I gave them, they could name this area or that area. So I gave them the choice of the area. What I did not give them the choice of was the amount. And you know, I'm kind of looking at what you're talking about. I mean, it was not a significant choice I was giving them. Should I have given them the choice on amount too?
No, but what you're pointing out that I should have mentioned, so I cut out everything about the related literature, but of course there is a big literature in psychology about how illusion of control, right? So essentially giving people a choice, at the end, yourself a choice. So you're doing a third-party design, right? So it's not that people who make a choice themselves feel that they're more in control. But I think that's what might happen for you, right? Is that if you give people a choice, even if it's very nominal, they might feel that they're more in control. I don't have any strong opinions if you should have given them more, more alternatives or more. Okay.